Zoom recording. Here we go. Good morning from the top of Australia, guys. Good morning, Phil. Good morning, Oliver.
Hey, Dennis.
Good morning or good evening.
This is just a little impromptu meeting with Awakening in Health. And we got two fantastic guests this morning, and I'm just going to allow them to introduce themselves. Oliver, chip in, please.
Yeah, sure. So I'm a sales coach, and I've been in sales and new business development for over 20 years. And I've got a lot of stories when it comes to stress and the effects it has on the body. And yeah, usually I've been in a lot of high pressured environments, high stressful environments. So yeah, there's a lot I can throw in here for you guys. And I'm sure there's going to be a lot more questions that I'll have for both of you.
Excellent. And Phil.
Cool. Okay. It's like Groundhog Day. I did this yesterday.
Yes.
Okay. Well, my name's Phil Escott, and I'm the author of a book called Arthritis, the Best Thing That Ever Happened to Me, which is how I got very sick back in 2010, and rheumatoid arthritis and millions of other ailments, and figured out how to heal myself of them. After thinking that I was kind of an expert on diet and health for about 3 decades and written other books, and realized that I actually knew nothing, and I had to throw out everything I thought I knew and go back to square one. And it took me about 3 years to get rid of that. And then since then, I've just been helping people in private consults and Facebook groups that I've got and social media and whatever to reverse their own autoimmune conditions and understand what it is that leads us into that chaos in the first place of all our ancestral disconnects. So that's pretty much who I am.
Okay, and you've got a fairly impressive story, Phil, because you were told on a few occasions that you basically had a chronic disease which you would never be able to fix, and you were kind of given, I guess, the wheelbarrow of medications and said, "Sorry, mate, see you later. We can't sort you out."
Well, you know, I never quite got up to the wheelbarrow. I just took 2 or 3 of them, and for a little while, about a month or 2, and it was pretty obvious that that none of them were working, and they were just making me sicker. And so I stopped that and realized that this was yeah. I mean, when I get some client, if they're newly diagnosed with some imaginary illness that they've put some label on, modern medicine, when actually there is only one ailment on the planet, which is mitochondrial dysfunction. And when they're newly diagnosed and they haven't taken any drugs, it's very easy to reverse these things. It's not easy, but if you do everything right, it's fairly swift. But if somebody's been on medication, then however long they've been on medication, that is how difficult it is to reverse these issues, because you're having to get rid of all the poison that they put into you. So yeah, that's it really. They told me that everything was incurable that I had, but of course that's nonsense. And I mean, it's part of the initial brainwashing, isn't it? Where you sit down in a doctor's office and they say, "You've got this, it's incurable, and you're going to have to take this medication."
I'm going to play,
and you walk out devastated. Whereas if somebody comes to a consult with me, I say, "Look, you've got this issue, and you've messed up, you know, through no fault of your own, just through the advice that you've been given from all these the brainwashing outlets, and it's a marvelous opportunity for you. You know, you're going to go through this, you're going to come out better the other side, and it's going to be marvelous. You're going to end up with this knowledge of how to keep yourself and all your family healthy." So who's going to have the best outcome? You know, the person who's told that they've got chronic disease and they're going to die from it, or who's been told that? Immediately you're set up with a whole different mindset.
I'm going to play devil's advocate a little bit, because I'm kind of come from an area where I was firmly entrenched in that whole allopathic medical paradigm, so I'm fairly familiar with it. And to say that I've kind of had a rude awakening and a bit of a shock over the last 5 years with getting much closer to where you're at would be one of the understatements of the year. But again, so devil's advocate, here we go. So I've got a I'm in a situation where my guts are in a bad way. I've got something like Crohn's disease, and my doctor gives me something like, you mentioned a drug called methotrexate, which is a horrific drug. It's actually a chemotherapy type drug. It's used for cancer. So I take this drug and my symptoms go away. Why is that not sufficient?
Well, I always use the analogy of getting in your car in the morning and the oil light warning's on. And so you drive it to the garage and the guy gets a hammer and he smashes the oil warning light. And he says, well, that's 50 quid. And you pay him and drive off. And then sometime down the road, the engine blows up because it had no oil in, and this is what modern medicine does. It just covers the symptoms, and there's nothing to get to the root cause of it. And in covering up those symptoms, it does all sorts of other things, like methotrexate. I mean, I see it where people have, horrendous liver damage, retinal detachment, all kinds of stuff, and they know about these side effects, and they've even taken the Hippocratic Oath saying, first of all, do no harm. And they're accusing me of being a dangerous quack for saying, okay, let's look at all your lifestyle and diet and that sort of thing. And yet they're giving these poisons. And there comes a time when people are so wrecked, because even if they do get an initial lessening of symptoms from methotrexate, it never lasts. And I've been thrown out of probably every single arthritis healing Facebook group that there is, apart from the ones that I've actually started, for having the temerity to suggest that you can actually heal. They don't like that. People get very attached to their disease because they're told it's incurable. And if anybody comes on and says, no, it is actually, you can fix this, then you're a very dangerous quack and a snake oil salesman. But they don't realize that every day there's somebody on that group posting pictures of really inflamed joints, fingers like sausages, bright red and agonizing. And they're saying, well, I'm on this Humira, I'm on this methotrexate, I'm on this, all of this sort of thing. But it's not working. It's never working. But if the doctors can't cure it with their science, then you can't cure it because you're a quack. And it's an extraordinary world that we're in. And sometimes it amuses me, and sometimes it devastates me. When it's brought onto children, then this really upsets me. I made a video a while ago called "Criminal Rheumatologist Destroys Family." It's on my YouTube channel. And it was about a family who I was working with who, they should just be able to heal, right? The mother should be able to choose what she wants to do for her daughter who had juvenile rheumatoid arthritis. But no, the rheumatologist said, you've got to take this methotrexate, this poor child who was like 5 years old. You've got to take that, or I'm going to go to social services and get your child taken away. Wow. So of course the mother's terrified. And it obviously that stops the healing, because then the mother's terrified, the child's terrified. The whole day is spent fighting the system instead of helping the child to heal. It was chaos. And I put that up, and then I got a deluge of replies and people getting in touch with me with their children who had been destroyed. One child had been blinded by all these drugs that they were given. He was 2 years old. Wow. And he'd been rubbing his eye for a year, and they said, oh, well, it's nothing. But I know that with arthritis comes a horrific condition called uveitis or iritis, where the eye gets incredibly inflamed and it's agony. I've had it 5 times. And that is one case where modern medicine can help. You just put steroid drops in the eyes, but it's not the root cause, but it saves your sight. But the doctors were so arrogant. They said a child that young can't have it. It's no big deal. Of course the child had it. And they could have put some steroid drops in and left all the other horrible drugs out. Now they've really messed this child up. Anyway, I'm going too much into that case, but this child was really messed up by 2.5 years old, with blinded in one eye and all this. And I've had it, and the agony that child must have gone through to get blinded in the eye. And this is what's going on out there. And it absolutely, I mean, I've been in tears at some of the cases I've seen. And, when you see what modern medicine's built on, and the old Rockefeller business model of repeat business, to get rid of all the true healers back early in the last century. It's incredible what has now become the standard of care. and you're in the system. My missus is an NHS nurse, and she's woken up to it all. She'll be back in a minute. If there's a big racket, she comes in the front door. But it's just all credit to guys like you who've been in that system and woken up. And we hear more and more people on the front line of the whole virus hoax, and hearing their tales of how it's, this isn't really what's happening. And it's waking up a lot of people, I think, with some very tragic collateral damage that a lot of people should pay for. This present situation is waking people up to a lot of this stuff, even within the NHS. I have one friend, a doctor on the front line, who's saying that at the beginning of this, everybody was fooled by it. And now about 80% of his colleagues are coming over to the fact that this is nonsense. And, the ones who are speaking out have been sacked or threatened. And it's an exciting time, because I think this system is crumbling. I don't know how long it's going to take. I don't know if it's going to be months, years, decades, but it's the beginning of seeing that system crumble. And, hospitals should have a trauma department and a human body department. They don't need a kidney department and a liver department, all that, separating all this stuff. You need a human body department. You don't need to go in with a broken little finger and say, I'm sorry, that's on your left hand. You have to go to the right little finger department. I mean, it is that ridiculous sometimes, isn't it? How much it's segmented. And we need to just put it together and realize that every bodily system works in harmony with the other bodily systems, and each organ works in harmony. And these specializations are pretty much nonsense and keeping everyone blind. It's like the blind men, feeling an elephant and describing. One's got the tail, one's got the trunk, one's got the side of it. They're all going to describe different things. And that's what's happening in modern medicine.
I couldn't agree more. And you make such a huge load of interesting points. I don't know where to start, to be honest with you, but it is quite in depth. But one of the observations I got when you're talking about what you're talking about is sometimes these possibly preposterous sounding comments. And for example, you talk about the Rockefeller funded Institute of Medicine. That is actually historically 100% correct. And a huge eye opener for me was something which I talk about certainly in my videos is how disastrous the Flexnor report was, which I think came out in around the 1910 roughly, which essentially destroyed the reputation of otherwise credible alternative sciences. And it actually ended up having a lot of very, very good practitioners put in jail, as you said. So it
was a modern witch hunt.
Absolutely. And so these kind of things that people like yourself, which can sound like throwaway comments, are rooted in absolutely rock solid evidence. And I think this is one of the points that I really want to stress. The other kind of thing which you nicely segued into was the I guess the power of hearing a diagnosis and how damaging that can be, and the stress that comes along with, I guess, fighting for your life in some situations. And this is a beautiful kind of segue into Oliver, because he works very directly with I guess a cohort who have got stresses from a load of different areas. So Oliver, would you like to chip in with your observations about this conversation so far?
Yeah. So I'm just thinking, how far back do I actually?
You've just frozen there, Oliver.
Got into sales, and I saw people around me all dropping ill, falling ill. Okay, good. So when I got into sales officially in the city, in London, I saw a lot of people around me stressed, ill, burnout, what have you, all dropping off like flies. And it even affected myself. I would go to work in the morning as pale as can be, and before I'd finish work, I'd have a big tan, and that was high blood pressure. And it wasn't just me. There was quite a few people in the office, though I did begin to attribute a lot of it to diet and lifestyle, because everyone's working incredibly long hours. People are smoking. There's so much coffee. There's fry-ups for breakfast, there's fry-ups for lunch. And the doctors would just generally dish out pills. They wouldn't ask, what do you eat? How much alcohol do you drink? They weren't asking any of those questions at all. And for some people, it was a quick fix. That's the best way I can put it. It was just a quick fix. Yet people still take time off from work to recover. And they'd be taking all these pills. They'd go back into work for a few weeks, couple of months, and having to reach targets, and sometimes people breathing down your neck. It was a very stressful environment. Even some of the people that I'm working with now and coaching at the moment, some of them are stressed, and a fair amount of it, I believe, is brought on. And this affects some of those that I'm working with now more from a mental health perspective. It's not so much, I've got high blood pressure, I've got to reach my targets. It's their mind's kind of all over the place. They don't know what to do. Their emotions are all over the place. And I'm just telling them to breathe. That's it. Breathe. Go for a walk.
Perfect little time to get back to feel here, because people have this concept of stress being just partitioned in this ball on the top of your shoulders. And I'd love to hear what Phil would say about how accurate or inaccurate the concept of stress being a psychological problem is.
Well, it's funny, isn't it? You know, everybody says, well, stress is an important thing. but what do they think of as stress? They think, oh, I'm stressed because I hate my boss, or I'm stressed because I didn't get enough sleep last night. All of these things may be, but it's a very small part of it. So stress really is anything that impedes mitochondrial functioning. And this can be anything from your circadian rhythms and, you know, having too much blue light at night. And Oliver was asking what blue light is. It's basically the frequency of, I should have had Graeme on. I was talking to Graeme earlier today. I said, drop in, surprise them, and really let's get into the science of light. Dennis would love it. If Graeme doesn't drop in, then, you know, he's had a few beers and what the hell. But I think that all of these things come into play when it comes to stress. It's past traumas. It's little niggling things that you have a problem with in your relationships that you haven't addressed. It's the artificial light. It's, Oliver, I mean, the blue light is basically, you know, if you have an LED light or a strip light up in your house, this is more midday than the midday sun. There's more blue light in there than there should be in the frequency of light. We're designed to have spectrums of light naturally in the morning and the evening that trigger the melatonin release in the morning and trigger the melatonin production in the morning and the release of cortisol, and then in the evening that trigger the release of melatonin that's been produced in the morning. And if we have the wrong light, like, you know, we'll get up in the night and we'll look at our phone for the time, and that just tells you it's midday, and then you're done. You know, if you go into the bathroom, you have a pee and you put the light on, that's midday. The body is reset. You know, if you're a guy and you walk into the bathroom, you know, piss in the sink. It doesn't matter. You know, it's more important that you're healthy, whatever. You know, if you can't hit the toilet, if you're not that accurate in the dark, don't put the light on. It doesn't matter. It's more important that you get your circadian rhythm together. And there's all sorts of things you can do with it. You can hack your phone so that it's beautiful red light. I've done that. You can put Ayres on your computer. You can wear blue blocking shades. You can put incandescent bulbs up, maybe even the fire glow ones with orange on the outside. This is what I've got here at the moment. We've even got a screen over the TV, you know, orange screen over the TV, so the kids that won't wear the blue blocking shades, I probably should, even in this light, probably should. I'll bung them on now just to show off, you know, should have blue blocking shades on at this time of night. And then that whole circadian rhythm, so you're sleeping right, because even if you get everything else right, you're not going to heal if you don't do the proper sleeping time at the correct time when it's dark. Other stresses, diet, you know, and all the things that we're told about diet, everything is based on absolutely useless epidemiological studies, over 10,000 of them. that people have based all this nonsense on, and Ansel Keys's ridiculous lipid hypothesis that says that saturated fat causes heart disease and all of that. You know, all of these things that are built up over the years. Like you walk around the supermarket and you'll see the heart healthy section. I mean, if you want to bypass in a few years, if you want to be under the surgeon's knife, eat everything from that section. It's nonsense. Everything is upside down. So it takes a lot of time to see through it, you know, and people like us who are told, we're told we're unscientific and quacks and whatever. We're just harking back to ancestral times. The new insane model of medicine is the modern one. It's only been around 100 years. We've been around millennia, and it's called real medicine, and the other stuff is called alternative. This new wave of medicine is the alternative medicine. It's not been around for long. And so, you know, when you see these little spokes to the wheel that create the wheel of health, you can see that it's very, very simple to deplete the body of all that stress. You know, you're talking about the city. Let's take a little example where you have to get up early. You know, people will get up and they'll go to a gym and they'll think that's healthy. So they're running on a treadmill at like 6 in the morning. Yes. And if there's blue light, there's screens, there's TVs, and they're running on this treadmill covered with all these EMFs. They've probably got their phone on. They've probably got headphones in as well, putting all that stuff straight into your ears. They're doing that. And then they come out the gym and they go, do you know what? I burned off some calories. So now I can go and eat some like, I don't know, pastries for breakfast, because that's okay. I burned off the calories. The calories in, calories out theory is absolutely nonsense. It's hormonal chaos, absolute disaster. And then they think, right, I've done all that. Now I go to work. And then they go to work. They're really stressed. They're pushed by their boss. They've got all these expectations of how they should look. They're not looking right because they think I'm training like crazy, and yet I'm not looking right. I haven't got my abs out. I don't look good. I got my first set of abs lying on the sofa doing nothing, eating nothing but fat and meat when I was over 50. I had owned a gym. I was a mountain biker. I wrote for the magazines. I could never get lean, however much I exercised, because I was doing the calories in, calories out thing rather than looking at the fats and the whatever, you know. And so anyway, they go to work and they get all these stresses and all of that sort of thing happens. And then they go home and they've got these expectations of what they should be with their partner or whatever. And they've completely trashed all their systems. So they're probably impotent anyway. So they've got sexual problems, they've got relationship problems, they've got everything going on. And then they stay up late at night because they're panicked and they're looking on their phone. They need a bit of, I need to wind down before I go to sleep. So they've got this massive, great blue screen that says that this is midday in the middle of the summer. This is the winter. Oh, it's okay. I better carb up again for tomorrow's exercise. So they're eating a load of bananas and stuff like that. Absolute lunacy. But then what have you got? You've got a hunter-gatherer tribe. No expectations, no posters, nothing of like, you need to have this body type. You need to have this job. You need to find a great job to do this. You need to have all this brainwashing education, it's called, you know, when you go to school. So none of that crap. They get up in the morning, they've got bare feet. If they got anything on their feet, it's probably animal skins that conduct the electricity. They're out in the natural light all the time. They're walking around, they do what they're supposed to do. They go out and they hunt, they come back, they have a successful day or they don't. That's the extent of the stress. The fight or flight mode is not chronic like it is with us. If they get chased by an animal or they're chasing an animal, that's some wonderful stress. That's some adrenaline. Beautiful. And then they come back home. They don't have their worries about a mortgage. They've built their house. And if it gets blown down by a hurricane or something, they build another one, right? The mortgage company is not going to be chasing them every day. They don't have to go out and read their meter. They haven't got somebody hassling them to put a smart meter in that's going to ruin their mitochondria as well. You know, all of these things in the modern world. And when you compare it to our ancestors, you can see that they had all their problems. They had fights, they had relationship problems, they had all of these things, but it didn't even a quarter fill up the bucket of disease. You know, so when they died, it was infant mortality, it was falling out of trees, it was bear attacks, it was, you know, bacterial infections from breaking a leg and having a leg going gangrenous or whatever. It was all of this sort of thing, but it wasn't cancer, heart disease, all this kind of thing. So nowadays, if we know how our ancestors lived, doesn't mean to say we need to go back and live in a jungle or in a cave. It means to say that we have ways of fooling our body into doing that. In the summer, get loads of light, go outside, get out in the morning, get the sunlight. In the winter too. In the winter, feel the seasons. You don't need to do it all day. We have a warm house, that's great. But every now and again, do some cold thermogenesis, get some cold into the body, get the light right. You know, it's very, very simple, really, when you look back at our ancestry and ignore the deity of science. This is not backed by science.
But
this
Phil,
is not, I had a day yesterday, I was exhausted yesterday, with the whole day spent arguing on some group that I ended up being thrown out of in the end because of my pseudoscience. And I just knew that there was a load of people in there, probably about 10, who really could have done with all of this knowledge and a carnivore diet and all that kind of thing. I ended up with 2 of them being friends on Facebook, and they're going to be there. I argue because I know there's people watching that will pick you up on it, and they'll come along as clients and you can really help them out, and that's beautiful. But there's probably 8 of them who think that I'm an absolute lunatic and that I must never be talked to. I'm a dangerous quack that's killing people with my lies, faking all my healing.
But Phil, you said
really.
you talked about ancestors, but and I'm being a bit rhetorical here, but you know, our ancestors used the age span was only 30. How do you respond to that? So we have to be healthier now.
Yes, I love this one. Well, yeah. It's usually applied. I get it because I talk a lot about the Inuit who are fully carnivore, and they go, "Oh, the Inuit only lived to about 45 years old." Yeah, so they all just died at 45, did they? No. Look, the problem with these averages that they have is infant mortality mostly. You know, a lot of them lived to 90, and when they were 90, they did not have any of these chronic diseases. And so you take the average of 0 to 90 and you get to 45, and this, oh, they all live to 45. Okay, right. But if you there's another theory, which I cannot prove, but which is very interesting, that these bones that they dug up of our ancestors, like for example, they had no tooth decay. You know, when you don't eat carbs, you don't get tooth decay, full stop. Whatever anybody might argue about a carnivore diet, I see even cavities healing up. You know, you don't get any tooth problems on a carnivore diet, none whatsoever. And so they're looking at these skulls and these skeletons and they're saying, well, this person was probably about 40 years old. Were they though? Or were they so healthy that that skeleton of a 90-year-old looks like 40? I don't know about that one, okay? But I do know that, that back in those days, they didn't have any of those issues. Now, when they say they all live to 30, it's mostly the vegan pseudoscience from these ridiculous books like the China Study and the Blue Zones by T. Colin Campbell and Dan Buettner, who, you know, even, to be honest, even more than Bill Gates, I'd like to be alone in a room with them strapped to the wall and I just have a pair of pliers, because I think they've been basically war criminals, these guys. But it's totally misrepresenting everything. But if you actually look at the truth, it's really quite interesting. Because take the Inuit. What is the life expectancy in the Arctic? Well, it's a very harsh environment for human beings, even if they did live to 45, and a lot of them lived a hell of a lot more than that. But even if they lived to 45, that's a miracle. Now, if you look, instead of looking at the silly studies that have been done on the Inuit since the 1970s, when grains had already come in and they were already sick, you look at them on their actual traditional diets and read books like Fat of the Land by Wilhelm Stephenson, where he went out in about the 1910 or something, and he lived with the Inuit for 10 years. And so he had it wasn't about diet. He just lived there. He had no reason to be, to have any bias or whatsoever. And he noticed that he used to write that they were the most robust of anything. Now, the Western explorers used to go out there and they would pack rice and beans, that kind of thing. And they would get scurvy within about 3 months and they die pretty quickly. Now, they knew back then that you didn't need limes, nothing like that. You just needed to get on a full carnivore diet, a local ancestral diet, and none of the Inuit ever got scurvy. And you could not only prevent scurvy, but cure it on fresh meat, because there is enough vitamin C in it or whatever that you need to reverse the scurvy. And people were getting on that and even reversing things that they had back home on that ancestral diet because it was appropriate to that region. So let's see, if you send a vegetarian or a vegan up to up into the Arctic, they've probably got about a 3 or 4 month life expectancy. So even if they do live to 45, that's pretty much a miracle, right? Absolutely marvelous. So this business that they only live to 45, I think that's great, living 45 years in sub-zero temperatures with absolutely no plant matter available to eat. I think that's marvelous. Compare, you know, that's yeah. I'd gone on a bit too much about that one, but it is one that vegans hit me with all the time when they attack me on my YouTube channel and send me death threats and whatever, which they do. And yeah, it's all about light. You know, up there you need a full carnivore diet. If you're down at the equator, fine, pick stuff off trees. You have the sunlight, you have that kind of thing. The Maasai are almost full carnivore, even down on the equator, and they're incredibly healthy. So I would say look at tribes, look at the people in tribes who get to 70, 80, 90 and see how healthy they are. Forget this business about averages. You know, none of those people are on ventilators. None of those people are on multiple drugs. None of them are in old folks' homes. They will be shinning up palm trees to raid bees' nests of honey well into that age, and they'll then just die suddenly. You know, it's live healthy, drop dead. What is it that Mark Sisson says? Live long, drop dead. Yeah, just, you know, no chronic disease. We don't live longer in the West, we die slower.
Okay, incredible stuff. Oliver, any comments on that?
Well, there was so much. There's so much to say. Though what you guys are kind of recommending, how I interpret it is, this is more of a lifestyle change, and through personal experience, it's not something, I'm going to say, it's not something you can just drop and pick up because of the misinformation. I.e., I was that person that goes to the gym at 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning for a couple of hours, and then before the office, a full English breakfast, maybe lunch, a full English breakfast plus the cigs plus the booze. And
Oliver,
that was
Oliver.
Yeah.
Nothing wrong with a full English breakfast as long as you don't have the fried bread and the potato waffles and stuff like that, and it's not fried in vegetable oils. Don't worry about a full English breakfast.
and grass-fed.
Grass-fed. I'll have to ask the local greasy spoon then. But yeah, that was part of the lifestyle, and eventually it caught up with me, and I tried to be healthy, well, within reason. But then again, there's so much, I'm going to use the term, misinformation out there. I laugh when I hear you guys say, oh, there are people that eat a banana in the evening. That's me. I have my banana in the evening, and I don't do the glass of milk. So I think, yeah, banana will probably help me sleep. But there's so much information out there. And again, I'm going to say it's a lifestyle change. And I'd heard something very similar to what you yourselves have you're actually talking about light and fruit, especially local fruit. I heard this fruit and vegetables 5 years ago whilst I was in Hong Kong. And I didn't understand what my flatmate was talking of. He said, you don't eat this, you don't eat that. If it grows locally, you eat it. And then he was talking of light, and he's going really technical, and he's talking of inflammation. I'm not going to say he was a quack because he was so convinced and convicted, but it was way over my head at the time, and I didn't understand what he was going on of. But yeah, I'm going to say there's so much here. You talk of light. I'm thinking of lifestyle change, and some of the things that I come across actually scares me. So I remember Dennis talking before of milk. I want full fat milk, but then when I hear milk is crap, you want to go for the better milk. I'm like, well, what better milk? And then I do a search on the internet. I'm thinking, bloody hell, how much for a litre of milk? How much for a pint? Yeah, there's a lot of things out there.
Well, look, Oliver, it's very nuanced. I mean, dairy is a huge subject. Some people are okay with it, some people aren't. But what do you call dairy? Do you call the horrendous, homogenized, pasteurized, red top, zero fat milk in the supermarket that it's funny when you see somebody really fat in a supermarket and they're pushing a trolley around and they've got this red top milk and they've got some kind of Crisco sort of whatever margarine shite and they've got that in their trolley, and you're thinking, look, just go over and get the cream, and just go over and get the cream and the butter. You're going to be fine. You've been doing this for years with the low fat stuff, hasn't worked. You're still massively obese, and you're having all this low fat stuff. It's not working. So it's pasteurized, which means it takes all the lactase out that helps you digest the lactose. You know, if you want to take dairy and you're okay with it, better to stick to butter and hard cheeses and, you know, the fattier end. If you can, the A2 dairy rather than the A1, which is, you know, goat's milk or Jersey cows or whatever. There's so many nuances to dairy, but we don't need it. And I mean, nobody milked a buffalo. You think to the Plains Indians, right? Nobody milks a buffalo, right? You're going to get trampled. You go out there, you spear it, you eat it. Our ancestors did not eat much dairy.
What about
you cannot milk a wild animal. It doesn't happen. So, you know, it's not necessary for us. It's necessary when we're babies. That's one thing vegans are right about. That, you know, milk is really intended for the babies of species. It's not intended for us. But it is delicious, isn't it? I mean, I could eat cheese and butter all day, every day, just
Phil,
constantly. But I'm better off without it.
What about the medicinal qualities of raw milk? And you know, there's a cohort there that could argue, and I'm not too sure exactly where I stand on this, that one of the reasons why dairy is so putrid is because of those pasteurization processes and the homogenization processes. But the raw milk itself has got this wonderful of own microbiome, which can have incredibly powerful healing effects, and that's something that obviously the Weston A. Price Institute points to a little bit as well.
Well, you know, I hear a lot of people who have really helped their healing on raw milk. And I have a daughter, for example, who's 12 now, and she had, you know, when she was like 2 or 3 and she was weaned, she had horrendous eczema. And all we needed to do was to swap her from regular milk to the local farm where it was unpasteurized. Her eczema went away.
Wow.
Now, with my son, it didn't work that way. We had to work on so much, and unless he was fully carnivore, absolutely fully carnivore, not even a quarter of an apple a day, his eczema would disappear. 1/4 of an apple, it would come back.
Wow.
You know, that's how sensitive we can be when the gut is really knackered. And I believe the root of their problems was back to cesarean section and not getting the right gut flora when you're born.
Yes.
Now that's a huge subject, and I didn't know about that back then. But he's fine now, and it's completely disappeared. It takes a while, like 3, 4, 5 years old, and then the gut integrity comes in naturally. People who've healed, you know, I remember reading a lot about Argenus von der Planets, and a great name, isn't it? He's brilliant. But he was a guy who had this monstrous health issues and went off in the desert to die, and he'd had enough, and then some fox brought him a rabbit and he ate it, and then he got onto some local farm and ate butter and raw milk and all of that sort of thing. And then you can see films of him when he's recovered from everything and all of that. And then he's on programs eating even raw chicken. You know, he just ate all his meat raw and just sticks of butter and some honey and some raw milk. Great, if that works. But, you know, some people just need to go back to absolutely full carnivore. I always say to people, go back to lamb and beef, salt and water, and then reintroduce stuff. And those are the things that do not trigger anything. And unless, of course, you've been bitten by a Lone Star tick, in which case that's another whole rabbit hole. But who engineered those Lone Star ticks in the first place? But it's a huge rabbit hole. But if you're not sensitive to beef, and that's probably the only way you ever will be, beef and lamb, grass-fed, then go back to that and then reintroduce the other stuff and see what happens. See what's going on with your particular physiology and whatever you have. Some people are absolutely fine with dairy. Now, but it can be a sliding scale as well. Like I went carnivore in 2015, and I probably spent 3 or 4 years eating nothing but steak and butter, you know, well, meat and butter. And then my partner was diagnosed with Graves' disease, where you can't even have a couple of molecules of dairy a month, or you're not going to reverse it. so I said to her, right, I'll cut the butter as well. And I did that, and suddenly my abs popped out and all the sinus issues went away.
Wow.
Now, I'd been carnivore for that long and I'd been in so much pain with rheumatoid arthritis. I thought, right, my joints don't hurt, so I'm fine with butter. But there's a couple of other issues. And I thought, well, I'm blaming that on the central heating. I'm getting a bit of sinus thing, in the winter maybe. And I thought, I've got my abs covered up a bit, probably because I'm drinking a bit too much wine. Okay, not that carnivore, but what the hell? We all have our failings. But when I dropped the butter, suddenly all of that reversed, the whole lot. Hold on a minute.
Can I ask, were you eating organic butter, or were you eating just the normal butter? Because my feeling is fairly strongly that if you're doing carnivore, especially as well, you have to be eating healthy animals. And for example, I'm very lucky to have somebody who does organic produce around me, and the difference being no antibiotics, grass-fed, but natural grass-fed. So I mean, as we know, things like glyphosate and pesticides are just about ubiquitous all around the world, but at least it's not direct spraying, it's kind of indirect consumption. But my feeling is that, do you think when you're talking about butter and those kind of things, that we're making a mistake if we're not focusing on healthy animals as opposed to the sick, poor, bloody creatures that are mass farmed and mass produced?
Well, that's always a consideration. I mean, most of the time there were two brands where I eat Kerrygold, where it comes out of Ireland, and okay, it's pasteurized, but it is grass-fed mostly, and the grass-fed, the pasteurization issue is more of a problem with the higher carb dairy, like milk and through to yogurts and whatever. When you get to the butter, there's not much more of that, not much of that lactase problem going on. It's mostly a casein problem. Okay, the one problem, it was A1 dairy, but then also the Issey-sur-Mer, the stuff that you can get from Sainsbury's, which is French butter, and it's raw, and it was that too. But I just feel better off without it. I love the stuff, even as a kid, I used to eat it with a fork, with nothing else. And I remember my aunt sort of saying, what are you doing? That's not going to do you any good. And of course it was fine. But yeah, it depends. Also, it depends on how leaky the gut is. Like when I dropped it for a while, I felt loads better, but now I can reintroduce it again. I don't eat it every day like I used to, but sometimes, like today, actually, I've had a big butter feast today, but I won't do it for a while. And then it's fine. It depends. It's about listening to your physiology, isn't it? It's I can get up in the morning and say, I really want a bunch of oysters. My body just wants oysters. I don't even really like them that much, but that evening I mentioned with Jack Cruz, where I probably ate about 30 oysters, and it was the first evening that I'd ever met Jack Cruz or eaten oysters. We were in an oyster restaurant, and I thought, I'm going to be the first person who's actually going to blow chunks over the table at Jack Cruz, because I can't stomach an oyster. It's like a great big ball of snot. but I was fine. I thought, actually, they're great, and my body felt totally supercharged with them. And then I carried on eating them. But then I stopped, and then I'd obviously got rid of some, maybe zinc deficiency or something like that. I don't know, whatever. But then I'll know one morning, I'll go, I really need some oysters, or this morning I need some liver, or this morning it's a lamb day, or it's a beef day, or your body sort of understands what it is that you need, and you develop your intuition. I think that's the important thing. So butter is something that I might need occasionally, not just every day, because, hey, I'm somebody who eats butter every day. You got to develop your intuition on these things.
So just clarify, Jack Cruz, I highly recommend. I mean, I started listening to him a while back, and if you can, I guess, comprehend the level at which he speaks, which is fairly technical, then you just learn so much from him. But the other thing I was into, my observation was when you were talking, Bill, we're kind of like two, I guess, health geeks to a certain extent, and we've got. And my question was going to be to Oliver. Listening to, I mean, you and me, we can probably talk at a slightly different level to maybe Oliver, but just from you listening to Phil talking, how does it shape your perspective, Oliver, about what healthy is and what healthy isn't, especially when we're looking at high stress environments and, just chronic sickness. And when you hear Phil kind of throw these kind of curveballs about people, Inuits and people living with Inuits who are, just in these remarkable conditions, shinning up trees at 80. And, do you think we're lunatics or what do you reckon?
No, not at all. I've been labelled by a good friend of mine as a truth seeker. I go out and look for things, so I don't necessarily absorb what's being thrown at me. I will usually have questions. So I don't usually watch the news at all. If it's important enough, it will come to me, and then I will question it. That way, I'm not hypnotized with regards to what's going on. Though listening to you and Phil, it seems as if a lot of things that I thought was unhealthy is actually healthy. It's as if you've just thrown everything around and said, no, this is good for you, that's good for you. I came to the understanding a wee while ago that fats were actually good for you. That I came to an understanding of quite a while ago. That it wasn't something that I need to shun from, be afraid of. It would be, all right, we'll have some sausages and bacon for breakfast. Though, one thing that I do want to ask, when you talk of eating butter, now, I might be wrong, but I've got a flatmate with me at the moment, and his grandparents' generation would actually eat lard and grease from the oven and spread it on bread. Now, for me, when I heard that, I thought, that's bloody disgusting. But when I hear you talking of eating butter, have you actually got, I don't know, this is what I need to ask, because if you're talking of a carnivore diet, then I'm thinking bread and vegetables and everything's out the window. You're just going for a tub of Anchor butter or Lurpak and just eating from it, thinking, oh, that's my snack. I'm not hungry anymore. Maybe I've got it completely wrong, but have I got it wrong?
It's about, I mean, butter's one of the most delicious fats. It's very addictive. All dairy is addictive to a certain extent. But I remember really buttered toast. It was fantastic. But if you eat the toast on its own, it's not really that nice. It's the butter that you put on it. Oh, I can't put too much butter on because it's going to give me a heart attack. I wish I could put more butter on, but this whole wheat toast is so healthy. I mean, it's absolute nonsense. I remember I used to go down to the chip here, and I'd get a load of chips, and I would have like 50-50 butter with each mouthful of chips. People go, you're going to have a heart attack. I go, well, I just love it. I don't care. And I'd feel worried about the butter. It's the chips that was the problem and the vegetable oil that they were fried in. Yeah. It was not, the butter was never the problem, really. I mean, okay, on a subtle level and with certain people, butter can be a problem, but it's never going to, okay, it does certain things, but it's never going to give you a heart attack. And it's not going to make you fat, right? But let's say that it's never going to do that. It does certain other things. It's not quite in the league of tallow as being a beautiful, nourishing fat. But I mean, our grandparents who probably ate, bread and dripping. Dripping is beef. That's tallow. That's what I'm on about. I mean, and back then the grains were not so covered in glyphosate. They're not ideal food. But we got away with it because we weren't having the trans fats with it and the really horrific stuff like this margarine. So when we got into the really bad glyphosate sprayed grains to make our bread out of, and then we spread margarine on it because that's heart healthy. I mean, that's when the heart disease epidemic started. So what's gone wrong there? Our grandparents were fine with those amount of grains, and I wish that I'd lived back there. Because I like to eat buttered toast, right? I did great, it's fine. Some of that brown toast with a load of butter on was really nice. But I'm not that bothered because actually you can even approximate it. Like I'll make burgers for the kids. So all I do is I get ground beef. I don't get any of the supermarket crap because they all fill it with wheat and all sorts of nonsense. I just get ground beef. I put some salt and pepper on it, squash it up into burgers, grill it each side, and there's burgers. Now, I might split them down the middle again, and then I'll grill them again. And then you get these kind of crispy things, almost like bread. And then you spread a load of butter on it, and even better, you put runny egg yolks on it. Oh man. I mean, seriously, that is a bread. It's just, I mean, I'm getting moist just thinking about it, It's just so gorgeous, and people would go, every single component of that is going to kill you. No, not at all. Okay, I've overcooked the meat, which I don't do. You know, I eat a lot of rare meat, but just every now and again, you got your toast, you got your eggs on toast, basically your carnivore version of eggs on toast.
Yeah.
And I don't eat the whites because they can be quite inflammatory, but the yolks, beautiful. There's a load of stuff in there, choline, all these sort of nutrients that you need. Sometimes I'll have a binge on egg yolks, not that often. But I'll have a load. You know, if I eat egg yolks, I'll eat 12 at a time, and you know, it does no harm whatsoever. So all of these, this business of butter, right? What do you do with it? Well, you know, imagine that you have here's one thing I used to do. I don't do it so much anymore, but you have a roast joint, and then you've made some bone broth. You've been simmering all these bones that they crazily they give away for free at the butchers when they're charging 40 quid a kilo for fillet steak that has not much nutrients in it at all, no fat, nothing. So you get the bones home and you simmer them for 3 days or so in the garage, and you get this beautiful stock, just like you get in any amazing restaurant. And you got that in the fridge, and you've got some roast meat, and you cut up the roast meat, and then you tip some bone broth on it that you've also melted like a whole block of butter in with some salt and pepper. And you good. Tip that. Oh my God, that is just so delicious. And it's fine. It's absolutely fine to eat that. That's what you do with butter. That's what you do with butter, basically.
I'm going to chip in with a couple of interesting things. But one of the things that occurred to me when Oliver was talking was this inversion. And when you were saying, Oliver, that everything's turned up and down, I think the word inversion is the exact expression. And this is one that I'm an avid fan of The Human Unleashed. If anybody's watching this, I absolutely highly recommend it. Initially, if you're not educated in kind of some of the more sinister ways the world works, it sounds a little bit overwhelming to consider what those guys are talking about. But if you kind of have a little bit of an open mind, and if you're like Oliver and you don't watch television, then you will get what these guys are saying. But Phil, my comment on kind of when I was listening to Oliver and was, it can't be that the powers that be are not aware of what is healthy and what is not healthy. And to my mind, this is very I guess prescient in maybe the last 2 to 3 years for me, just looking at what's going on in the world and looking at the health advice we're getting in relation to a certain pandemic that's being thrown around. It seems to me that there almost is an organized attack on humanity. That's about the only way I could sum this up. And I'm intrigued to hear your comments, and it could be a rabbit hole or I don't know where you want to go with that. But am I crazy?
No, I don't think so. I mean, it's very easy to say, no, everyone's got our best interests at heart. But if you take all of the diet advice, the regular diet advice, and you do exactly the opposite, you'll probably be about 90% there. There's a couple of things that they throw in, like a half truth is always more powerful than an outright lie. So they give you a couple of things that are true. But I think the thing that occurred to me then when you were speaking was the story of Ancel Keys, where, back in the 60s, he perverted all the evidence that he collected with this 7-country study or whatever on who had the most heart disease. Oh, it was the ones that ate the most saturated fat. Well, he threw out all the inconvenient data of countries like France, where they eat a load of saturated fat, and they have no heart disease. Well, less heart disease, than a lot of other countries. So he threw all of that out, and he created this lipid hypothesis, which you eat saturated fat and cholesterol and you get heart disease. Well, that stuck, and that's what we based our science on. But did he know? Was he paid off by the sugar industry? It seems very likely. At the same time in England, there was a guy called John Yudkin, and he wrote, what is the book? White powder white death, or
Yes,
something like that. I forget what it was called.
Yeah.
But he was writing about how sugar was the culprit and not fat. He was not essentially right, because it was also the seed oils, but he was much more right than Ansel Keys. And he was, you know, just basically died as somebody who was ridiculed and debunked and all that sort of crap. But then if you look at Ansel Keys's life story, it's really interesting, because he went off and he lived in an area in Italy where they eat a whole load of saturated fat and seafood and all of that kind of thing. And he lived to 100 years old. Now, you're telling me he went there and he ate like low fat and margarine and stuff? No, he didn't. He knew what was going on, and he got 100 years out of it and a hell of a lot of money. And he left in his wake a massive pandemic of obesity and suffering and death and heart disease and diabetes and everything. And I believe that guy is probably responsible for more genocide ever than anybody else, until maybe the modern day, when perhaps Bill Gates and Fauci have overtaken him. But he unbelievable nonsense he talked, but he must have known it, because if he hadn't known it, he'd have gone off and lived with one of these tribes or these areas where they eat incredible amount of carbohydrates and stuff, right? No, but he identified a place on the Mediterranean with a beautiful climate and somewhere which wasn't too outlandish, and that they had a lot of centenarians, and it was nothing to do with the diet, nothing to do with it whatsoever. And he went and lived there, and he lived to 100 years. So that is a bit of a clue to me that it's all a load of bullshit.
So my next question then would be, was he just this I guess isolated figure who accidentally screwed the whole world up, or was there other things behind it? And the reason I say this, and it's not a trick question or anything, but you know, I just listen, and I've got lots of stuff on my YouTube channel about this as well. But this absolutely anti-health advice that we're getting at the moment. So you know, one of the things, as you know, I talk about vitamin D, and this whole thing about staying inside to prevent, you know, a pandemic of whatever, when we know that vitamin D is one of the most important things for our immune system, just about bar none. And then you know that vitamin D works specifically within your gut, and it supports all those lovely bacteria, which again help your immune system. And then we've got, you know, this idea that 40, 50 years of research on the fact that masks cannot prevent virus is dismissed overnight. And all of a sudden we have these very vague correlations between looking at droplet airflow with absolutely no substantial link between whether they actually block a specific viral particle or not, but just this hypothesis or this assumption that because you can see droplets getting blocked, that means the virus is going to be stopped. And where else would I go with this? You know, even on the CDC and well, I think the World Health Organization talking about eating high processed oil diets and things like this. I mean, I cannot but help to think that just to say back to what I said, these guys have to know, and is this a deliberate attack on us? Are we, as some people might, the conspiracy theorists, and just to talk about that, which also just really irritates me, any policeman, any investigator of anything is by default a conspiracy theorist, because they're theorizing that two people conspired to do something different. So this kind of psi operation of trying to shut people down by using the term conspiracy theorists is bullshit, and so many people fall for it. But if we wanted to kind of take that and say, is there a conspiracy against the useless eaters, as Henry Kissinger called us?
Well, I think so, and I think it all comes back to some crazy religious stuff. I think people have known all down the ages that instigating a real low nutrient plant-based diet is going to make people subservient and impressionable and aggressive, because their bodies are basically in hunting mode. You know, when we've been surviving on plants for a long time, we get into hunting mode. I'll just go off on a little tangent before you can remind me that I was going to go down the Seventh-day Adventist route. Now, remind me about that, but I need to go off on a tangent now. a very good exercise, I think, for people is to watch a TV series called Naked and Afraid. This is where they take people from, you know, who claim to be survivalist experts and whatever, and they put them into various environments, whether it's the you know, out with the lions and whatever in the Serengeti or in Africa or in some rainforest, and they say, right, you've got nothing, you've got no clothes, you've got nothing except maybe you can choose between a pot and a knife and a fire starter or whatever. You get 2 items, and there's one guy and one woman, and they go out and they do that. And a load of people go out with this sensibility that they're gonna find some nice fruit and whatever, you know. People, so I was arguing with a vegan the other day, and he was saying, well, of course, you know, you see a pig eating some apples under a tree, your impulse is not to go and get that pig and rip its throat out and eat it, you know, you rip it out with your own teeth and claws, which you don't have. You're going to eat one of those lovely apples and whatever. You know, okay, all right, it's a nice sensibility that the vegans always come up with, you know, put a rabbit and an apple in with a kid in a cot, and what are they going to eat? They're not going to eat the rabbit, right? They're going to eat the apple. All right, fair enough. This really doesn't prove anything, because you look at Naked and Afraid, right? They go in there, they go, oh, it's all right, we can find all this fruit and stuff. We're in the jungle. It's going to be plentiful everywhere. Well, it isn't, right? It's not sweet for a start. I mean, it's pretty tart, sour stuff. It doesn't, the monkeys and all the animals that eat it naturally, that are adapted to eat it, get to it before you. Whatever's left is covered in bat and monkey piss, and which can make you very sick, and it's full of worms and whatever. It's not like going down and getting a bunch of bananas at the grocery shop, right? So you find that all these people after a few days are going, how can we actually catch that pig? How can we spear it? How can we trap it? We need some animal protein. We need some animal fats. We're starving. And so, you know, put a vegan out there and just see what happens. It's nonsense, right? And so this is our ancestry. This is what's happened. Now, a lot of it's been perverted. I've actually remembered where I was going with this. The Seventh-day Adventist thing. Well, you know, vegetarians, they'll say, well, of course, you know, it's more healthy and all that. Actually, if you look down the ages, there are ways that they have used these diets, religious leaders, cult leaders, rulers of any sort. They've used these slave diets, you know, these grains and whatever, to make people really obedient. And the brains don't really work properly without enough saturated fat. So a lot of the present day plant-based stuff, and I'm not even going at vegans or vegetarians now. I mean, we're always told 5 a day, whole grains, do all this sort of crap, low fat, all this. It's just a method of mind control. It makes you stupid. It makes you, you know, the people who eat that way are going to look at the TV and they're going to believe that they need to wear a muzzle. And then they're going to go down the supermarket and buy that crap. Now, this started in the 1860s, I believe it was, with somebody called Ellen G. White, who had these visions that we should eat a Garden of Eden diet because the root of all evil was sexuality. Oh my God. If your hormones are in balance and you actually have sexual desires, this is incredibly evil. You know, you can't have that. It also shows your brain's working, you know, all the hormones are in balance. So what you need is no sexual desire whatsoever. So she started to push this and people started listening to her. Oh my God, this is a great holy woman. You know, she was just a lunatic teenager. Now, the White family, eventually they adopted this kid, and he came along at sort of 10 years old or whatever, and he started to help Ellen G. White with the typesetting of her lunatic pamphlets and books. Wow. And so as he grew up, he was indoctrinated in all of this, and he ended up being very successful with a load of cereal companies. And what was his name? His name was Kellogg. Harvey G. Kellogg. And this is such a beautiful story, because actually, you know, when you walk along the aisle and you see the Sunshine Breakfast, this is Harvey G. Kellogg's anti-masturbation cornflakes. And when you think that that is the sort of nonsense that our dietary guidelines have been based on all of this time, and it comes from religious lunacy, mind control, all of that. So yeah, of course we can go down that conspiracy rabbit hole, because it's there. It's in the old sort of documents of the Club of Rome and all of that kind of thing. You know, it's absolute madness down the ages, and it's being perpetrated now. I mean, what happened the other day is Bill Gates, right? Even the vegans, they distrust him, don't take his vaccines. But what's happening now? He's pushing plant-based diets. He's got investments in farm. He's become the biggest farmland owner. You know, he's bought up all this land in the States. He's going to cause havoc with that. He's invested in Impossible Burgers and Beyond Burgers, all this stuff that they've done recent studies, and it's been killing rats. You know, it's poisonous, this stuff. And now he's saying that every rich country should go over to fake meat, should go over to synthetic beef, which isn't beef, it's dangerous cell cultures done in labs that's going to cause, under blue light, under, you know, with GMO, with all this antibiotics and God knows what. It's lunacy. The whole thing is absolutely insane. And of course it can be traced back to absolute mind control and depopulation. Right, rant over.
Wow, wow, incredible, incredible. Listen, I'm going to challenge you a little bit more on that one. But Phil, the world is overpopulated and we can't sustain all this meat. And we need these rich benefactors to come in and tell us what to do, because they're talking to all the governments, so they know the pressure on the environment. And simply what we're doing is unsustainable. We can see this everywhere. It's on the news. We have climate change. We have global warming. So it's too impossible to think that this guy who's communicating with the top scientists and the top doctors in the world can just so blatantly want to do this cannot be correct, that somebody in the public eye can deliberately do so much harm.
You're right. You've convinced me.
That was
seriously, no, it's lunacy. It's absolutely sustainable. You got people like poor old Greta, who is you know, she's autistic, she's advocating vegan diets and having all this crap plastic packaged flown in from all over the world, and she eats all this synthetic crap, and the deterioration in her physiology is clear over the past couple of years. And the client, you know, she's controlled as a puppet, just as the pigtailed girls were in the Nazi propaganda. It's the same old thing, the same old thing. Find yourself a little pigtailed girl, and, you know, now she's upset all of the UK and India. Maybe this will come out. But yeah, so down to the sustainability. Well, you know, burping and farting cows, these are causing climate change. All right, yeah, okay. Let's just for a moment think that let's fantasize that human caused climate change is a real thing, which, you know, I'm kind of 98% that it isn't. But okay, let's go away with your fossil fuels and all that kind of thing. Maybe go play with that. But burping and farting cows, come on. You know, centuries ago we had mega herds. We had megafauna, we had them roaming all the plains. There was more actually than there are now. Were all of these bison, aurochs, mammoths, all of these things down the millennia, were they holding their farts in? Were they holding their burps in? You know, oh, we mustn't burp. You know, you can imagine a mammoth going, that's very rude to burp. No, come on. It's absolutely ridiculous. So all of this methane has been coming out the whole time. And they're saying that it's unsustainable because there's not enough land to farm beef to feed the world. Actually, there is. There's about, I think, I'm not actually up on the figures, but I think there's about 3% of the world's land mass that's suitable for crops. Most of that has been, well, depleted, and it's close to being destroyed. Some people say only 50 years of crops left on that land. If we put the ruminant animals back on, as people like Alan Savory are proving, and other people who are talking about it now, you can replenish the land, because that's what it's intended to be, instead of wrecking all the ecosystems and depleting the soil and chewing up deer and foxes in combine harvesters for the vegans' compassionate diet. You know, that's all being ruined. Whereas about, I think, 23%, just a figure, it just occurred to me, but something like that is suitable for grazing. So, okay, we're never going to do it. People want to eat vegetables. People want their Weetabix. People want that crap. They're too conditioned. So I'm not unrealistic enough to think that it's ever going to happen. But there is enough land to support everybody on the planet with grass-fed ruminant animals. There actually is.
And what I found fascinating was the couple of studies that were done, oldish now, that showed that when you got big herds of grazing animals, the soil microbiota actually ends up being methane negative. So in other words, the bacteria actually takes more methane out of the atmosphere than
it's sequestered as carbon. Yeah, it is. And you know, if you believe in that nonsense, then that is the way forward. This is why I look at the climate change thing, because all the solutions are absolute nonsense. So I don't believe that it's true. Probably it's not true. If it is true, so what? I advocate for saving all the ecosystems. So that's going to help anyway, whichever way around it is, whether it's true or not. So you know, this 23% of the land mass, a lot of that, you know, the 20% above the 3% that's suitable for crops isn't suitable for crops, but it is suitable for grazing. So you can put sheep and cows in certain areas without deforesting them and ruining the hedgerows and all of that kind of thing. And you can do that, and where you can't plant crops. You can't plant crops on the side of a mountain, you know, but you can put sheep up there, you can put goats up there, and you know, it's everything there's a little, if anyone's watching, there's a and it is interested, there's a if you look at the channel, Brian Sanders's channel, Food Lies, on YouTube, and he's got it as his main video now. It's easy to find. It's called Why We Should Be Eating More Meat and Not Less Meat. He is a genius. I was supposed to be doing a talk at some festival last year. Of course, it was shut down because of the muzzling hoax and all that. But I was trying to get all of that information. I was finding it difficult planning it out with, you know, PowerPoint, stuff like that, and getting it into less than about an hour. And he's done it in 15 minutes. It's the best talk ever. It's the only one you need to look at, you know, for every rabbit hole. And it's on the Food Lies channel, Why We Should Be Eating More Meat Rather Than Less. He goes into everything.
I've never heard of
the
this
environment, everything.
Really,
15 minutes, man.
Yeah,
go check it out.
Check it out. But one of the other things,
I've
always got my suspicions when you have a concept called climate change that grew in the early 90s between two of the richest men in the world from meeting in London, and the outcome is to get another tax happening. So I immediately, once you look at the history of this whole kind of climate change movement, you know, I think it was Maurice Strong and one of the directors of the Central Bank of London from memory, I can't remember this guy's name, who, you know, all of a sudden this climate change, to me, hoax has basically sprung from. And then if you go back and you see that the records have been only taken from certain points in the recent 100 or so years to prove a point that things are getting warmer. And if you add in previous years, there's absolutely no evidence whatsoever. And I mean, I could go on and on that. But again, to be honest with you, for me, finding out about those things, they connect with medicine and they connect with health. Because and again, it's almost like this partitioning of knowledge, like you were saying before about the different areas of the body. For me, knowing about a lot of this other stuff makes perfect sense to how now I see what's happening with health. And if I didn't know about that, I'd be looking at mainstream health and going, it just doesn't make sense. I don't know. And I just have to accept that all these clever doctors know way more than me, and I'll have to just fumble around and just accept what they're saying. But knowing that stuff just puts things into just a crystal clear perspective for me. And I'm intrigued as to what Oliver would say of possibly listening to two lunatics talking about some crazy shit, or do you think just listening to our dialogue, Oliver, as somebody maybe who's not as far down that rabbit hole, what are your thoughts?
Well, yeah, you guys go all over the place, but pretty deep down numerous rabbit holes. So I don't know if conspiracy is the right word, but I am going to say that there's a complete and utter cock up somewhere along the lines. And my personal take on this was when I was, I've actually got eczema. And when I was young, my eczema was pretty bad. I tried the steroids, I tried the creams, I tried everything. Tried changing the diet. And then it came down to a combination of things, including washing powder. But if we're talking of conspiracies and health and the attack on humans as a species, when I was living in Hong Kong and I wanted to go grocery shopping, I had to look at everything I picked up, I needed to look at the ingredients. There were things such as bread that looked like bread. It was the color of bread, but I picked it up and I looked at the ingredients and I didn't recognize one thing on the packet of bread out there. And I thought, this is, I said to my girlfriend at the time, this is not bread. I said, I don't care what it looks like. This is not bread. Let me pick up another loaf. Picked up another loaf. It's not bread. And there were so many chemicals in there that these things would last for probably a couple of years.
– Just frozen all over
humans as a species. Yes. Yeah,
you're back.
here.
You're back.
Okay, good stuff. If we're talking of an attack on us as a species, humans, then I'm going to say it's a long game. So with regards to what's happening at the moment, if you go back, when you brought up the story of Mr. Kellogg, and I was thinking, I didn't know that. That's something that I've learnt. But at the same time, when you go to the supermarket, and whether it's the processed foods or the tin foods, or even vegetables, sometimes I might even buy an apple. I'll bite into an apple and it doesn't taste like an apple. Or I could leave it in the fridge and it will be in the fridge for a couple of months and it won't even break down. So when it comes to health, whether it's COVID or what have you, I'm going to say you're going to need to take quite a few steps back and look at what's being put on the shelves in supermarkets. Because if we're looking at inflammation and say, for example, I've got high blood pressure, I know it's what I put into my body. I do know that. And I know I'm allergic to something, but I can't figure out what it is. With regards to what you're saying, everything makes sense. But where do you begin? How do you reprogram yourself? Where do you get the information? What do you eat versus what do you not eat? Otherwise, yeah, you just go along. And one of the things Phil was saying earlier,
I just want to get hold of you and give you a consult. And
yes, I was thinking the
same. We need to, Dennis and I need to get onto you and sort this eczema and high blood pressure out, man. It's not rocket science. We can do that.
I was even going to talk of the big chick, the obese girl in, say, for example, Sainsbury's, or you're walking down the street and she's going for, was it zero Coke, diet this, non-fat milk. And there's a few of them in my area. When I've looked at them, in my head, it's the frozen foods, it's the pizzas, it's the chips, it's the diet. And without even talking to her, I'm thinking, yeah, she's going to have quite a few things wrong with her. But I don't know what they are. And it's one of those things, this is a scary thing to ask, do some people want to get better? Or are they happy living in misery? Because it's something that they're used to. Let's say, for example, a smoker, they know that it's not good for them. Some of them don't even want to give it up, or they find it too hard to quit.
But here's the thing here's the thing that I always say, and it's much more than this. And we've got this tendency to be prejudicial towards people, but we just don't know how complex the whole body system is. And even when we think of one of the studies that I refer to a lot, it's just incredible, is a study done on dogs. And you take bacteria from one dog's stomach, you put it into another dog's stomach, and it literally changes the dog's sense of smell. So the dog is being directed by the bacteria from the other dog to go and seek those types of foods that it wants. Okay. And when you use those kind of scientific, you just can't make this stuff is crazier than fiction. So if we extrapolate on something like that, the kind of obese girl in Sainsbury's, she is not making the decisions. Her body systems are driving those decisions. And what you have to have is a tipping point, and that tipping point comes from getting educated. And at a certain point, maybe this thing we call willpower or concept or whatever might override those body responses. But if you don't know about them, you've got no chance whatsoever. I'm intrigued to hear what Phil would have to say about that.
Well, yeah. And I mean, even in the areas of things that we think that are very bad for us, there is a load of gray areas. This is why I have a problem with people who go, where's the science? Look at this study. This is the one that proves this, and this is the one that proves that. And there's so many gray areas. I'm going to get into alcohol and smoking. Smoking now, I don't advocate it. I've had periods in my life when I've done it, and I like it. I find I find, you know, when I've written my books, actually, I've been really into smoking a load of roll-ups, and it really helps my brain. And Jack is really into nicotine, you know, for certain things. Okay, these days it's packaged up with some appalling things. I can never smoke a cigarette out of a packet. I don't smoke at the moment, but I did actually, even up to last year, I had a bout of it. But I can't smoke them out of a packet. They have to be roll-ups, or preferably some sort of organic tobacco. Now, a load of the hunter-gatherer tribes have smoked, and they have never got any sort of lung cancer or anything. I don't believe it even causes lung cancer. I think it causes a bunch of other things, but you know, there's Elliot Overton, a good friend of mine, who has an amazing channel, EO Nutrition, and he wrote an amazing blog post on smoking. And you know, he's into the carnivore diet and all sorts. He's so knowledgeable, this dude. But he said, look, smoking, actually, if you look at it, most of the super centenarians who got to like 110, 120, they smoked. Is that a coincidence? Well, probably not, because it doesn't really cause what it's supposed to cause. It's in combination with other stuff.
Can I cut across really quickly? So I know, just sorry to interrupt, but it's just something that just jumps out at me. But it's smoking, and cannabis. They're the only two plants where we have actually receptors in our bodies for them. So we've got cannabinoid receptors and we got nicotinic receptors. And for me, the thing that jumps out is that can't be some kind of weird coincidence. Sorry, Phil, to cut you off.
Yeah, no, it can't. And Zofia said something interesting to me on the carnivore conference, where she got, Graeme smokes, you know, and I'd gone out, I'd done a talk, and I'd been listening to stuff, and I'd had a busy day. I thought, I fancy a ciggy, you know, and I walked out of this beautiful pagoda, pavilion thing by the pool, and Graeme, and I sort of scrounged one of them. I walked around the pool, and I there was Zofia, and she caught me, you know, like a little schoolboy, and I said, oh no, you caught me with a ciggy. She said, I've no problem with that. She said, as long as you don't have dairy, you'll never have any problem with smoking. Wow. You don't have dairy at the same time. You're not. I should grill her on that one day. Wow. And the same thing happened actually on a roof of a restaurant in London, when we were all absolutely smashed, and Jack Cruz was there, and I thought, oh, I fancy scrounging a ciggy off somebody. I thought, I can't smoke in front of Jack Cruz. My God, can you imagine that? And then I thought, fuck it, you know. Jack, anyone got any ciggies? And he goes, I've got no problem with anyone smoking as long as they do it in the sun. You know? And so they've all got their thing. But I think that it's a bit nuanced, and if you're having organic tobacco and whatever, and you're doing it because it's a time when you're thinking this and that, but like Elliot said, this myth of black lung and whatever, and surgeons have said that they actually can't tell whether a lung is from a smoker or not. There's nothing, this black lung, and quite often you find it's very protective, like in sort of people who work in areas in asbestos, you know, or the miners with the black lung. The smokers were actually getting away with it.
Really? Yeah, you've
educated me. And in the early days of this whatever was happening with COVID, whatever it is, you know, China, they had like 40% of the men smoke, and they had, it's like 12% of the hospital admissions who got on ventilators were smokers. So what's happening with that? You know, there's a load of things that don't add up. I don't advocate smoking. I don't think it's necessary. I don't think it's useful. If you want nicotine, there's easier ways to get it. But it is quite a fascinating thing, having been a smoker on and off many times, mostly off, but on every now and again. And there's something really pleasurable about it. I'm a carp fisherman as well, and I go out fishing, and when you got all your rods out and you're sitting there, the bivvy's up, and you're going to spend the whole night at the lake, and your feet are up, and you know the 3 rods are out, and you're thinking maybe some monster carp is going to come along, and there's only one thing you can do at that point, which is to make a roll up and smoke it, right? You know, I mean, all these sort of funny triggers that you have, or maybe with your first drink of the evening, or when I'm playing a gig in the break, you know, what the hell, I'm going to go outside, I'm going to cool down and have a ciggy. So, you know, there's certain conditionings, and I don't think if you do it like that, there's any problem whatsoever. You won't even notice. And then moving on to alcohol, but I don't condone it, right? And everybody watching this, I'm not condoning it. I'm just saying it's not the main thing. Like the government will say, oh, you're smoking and drinking and you're not eating enough fruit. Oh, come on, man. You know, what you're going to do? You're going to go jogging, or you're going to go down the gym in the artificial light. You're going to jog away and get some shin splints and ruin your body and your heart and blow it up like marathon runners, whatever. But, you know, always focusing on the wrong things. But then there's alcohol. Now, the interesting thing about alcohol, I was teetotal for most of my life. when I was plant-based, and I used to go for blood tests and whatever, and they'd say, "Are you an alcoholic?" I said, "I'm drunk for 30 years, you know, except the odd sip of wine where I get crimson and start itching and I can't stand it." And I had a fatty liver with cysts on the liver, and I went sort of vegan and did a load of liver flushes, and then I went keto, and my liver healed. And I had, you know, ultrasounds, and they turn me over and they say, you know, doing that, and have I got a fatty liver? No, not at all. It's absolutely amazing. Okay, well, what about the cysts that I had on the liver? And they'd say, well, it's impossible to get rid of cysts. You can't have ever had them. So go and look at my records. And they go look on the computer and they say, right, you got cysts. Okay, well, where are they? They go mad trying to find them. How did you do that? Well, I did it with liver flushing and sort of a high fat diet. Isn't that dangerous? And you're like, you want me to take methotrexate? You think that's dangerous? It's really weird. But okay, so I fixed the liver, and then I didn't have a problem with alcohol anymore. I could drink it and I didn't have any reaction. I didn't have hangovers. I didn't have anything. I thoroughly enjoyed it. You know, I've had a few brandies before I came on this evening, to be honest, but just to let you into a secret. But, you know, I mean, for the past sort of few years, I've actually just discovered it. I'm like a teenager at 58 now, thinking I've only just discovered alcohol, but I think it's because I do everything else right. They did a study on rats. That, again, I'm not condoning it. It's unnecessary, but, you know, if you want to do it, it's your own choice. You know, everybody's got their own choice. They did a study on rats where they had 3 groups of rats, and they wanted to find out how damaging alcohol was on these rats. So the first group of rats, they gave them seed oils, all the crap oils. And then another group of rats, they gave them, like, you know, the sort of neutral stuff like olive oil and avocado oil and, like, I don't know, whatever. And then one set of rats, they gave just tallow, just beef fat. And the first group of rats with the seed oils, they gave them alcohol and the livers blew up pretty quick. The second set of rats, they gave them alcohol and they had to give them a bit more, and then their livers blew up. They could not give the rats that they fed tallow enough alcohol to make any liver damage.
Wow.
I thought that was astonishing. And I think, and that now, listen, I'm not saying that's the only thing. I figure my liver is fine. But I think if I'd have drunk as much as I have, I mean, I don't drink monstrous amounts, but I drink quite regularly, much more than they would say is safe. And over the past 5 years, I think I would definitely have killed myself if I'd have still been on a plant-based diet with the liver that I had back then. And yet now I go for blood tests and everything's fine, except LDL up a bit, which you want it to be there, you know, right? On a high fat diet, it's absolutely fine. Everything else is perfect. And then I remember the first one, I went in and I said, okay, well, what about the liver results? You know, because I used to have terrible liver results. And she went, and I've been drinking a load of wine and brandy, and she looked at me and said, absolutely perfect. Okay, interesting, very interesting. Now, that's not to say it's good. There's times where I felt that I've consulted with Elliot over this, who's a real expert on this. And you know, drinking too much alcohol can do other things. It can pull the B vitamins out. It can make you more susceptible to sort of low-grade scurvy, where you might need to take a bit of vitamin C even on a carnivore diet, which you normally don't. You don't need any supplements whatsoever. But you've got to keep an eye on your thiamine and your B2 and the rest of the B vitamins, particularly thiamine, and you've got to keep an eye on some vitamin C levels. You know, there's certain things that show that, like little bits of dry skin, a little bit of brain fog, whatever comes in. You know, I'm terrible. I'm giving people a lesson in how to be an alcoholic while being a carnivore, which is that. But I love these biohacks. I love, you know, I've always been rebellious. But again, I love even rebelling against the carnivore movement. You know, I love to show what you can do, how far you can push yourself, and how you can bring yourself back from that. So
I think it's
what are all the misconceptions?
I think it's incredibly important, Phil, and I sometimes wonder where I'm positioning myself, and I don't, because we always have these discussions, people like yourself, myself, in this little nuanced area. That doesn't mean to say that we are like, you know, Gandhi sitting on a hill, pious as all hell, living a perfect life, whatever a perfect life is. We are all human. So I think for me to hear you, I mean, I like a drink every so often, but I try and, I drink organic wine if I'm drinking anything. But then if you go out, that's quite difficult to do. But I don't think I've ever, I find it really refreshing that I hear you talking about just being a real person. And the thing that is even more refreshing is that you're talking about, you know, having a drink or having a smoke or whatever it is. But and that this is other people. I think when people will listen to you saying that, they will go, hey, listen, this guy is just a normal guy, likes to smoke and a drink. This is relatable. You're not some of our kind of health, I guess, people who tell us kind of incredible stuff. They are walking that walk, and it's a tightrope, and they're not gearing off. And I think for some people that's inaccessible. So to my mind, having, just a kind of, and I put myself, I hope, in his basket as well. I'm a very normal person doing kind of normal stuff, but I've got knowledge of all this stuff that you're talking about as well. And of the whole, I think that's important to still live your life.
Yeah, well, I mean, like we both love Jack, and Jack can pack away a lot more alcohol than I can. And it's a choice, and you can adjust things in other parts of your life to compensate for that. And I'm a Gemini, and extremes, all or nothing. There'll probably be a time soon where I'll go completely teetotal again, and I won't drink for 10 years. and then maybe I'll take it up again when I'm 100. Maybe one day in about 4 years I'll be sitting there carp fishing, and I'll think, you know what, somebody look after my rods. I'm off down the garage for a packet of roll-ups. I don't know. It doesn't really matter. I seem to sort of skirt close to the wind or sail close to the wind and just sort of never quite get into so much trouble that it kills me. I feel that's how you learn. I put myself through it almost to find out what I can do for other people. Because if somebody comes to me and says, oh, well, I'm a smoker and I've got arthritis and I'm worried it's the smoking, and I go, well, look, man, there's nuances to that. But if you can't give up smoking right now, your main priority is to fix the gut. If you can stay on a carnivore diet, high-fat carnivore diet, and the roll-ups get you through that, fantastic. Go on with that for a bit and do what you can. I mean, the most effective program is the program you can stick to, right?
Absolutely. and nobody wants to be a supreme Olympic athlete in order to fix their health. So I think what you're offering is a package where people can still be human and not have to go through, I mean, the stuff you're talking about, it's nothing like training for the Olympics. It's nothing like it, especially if you have a beer and have a cigarette and stuff. It's actually fairly straightforward, once you get past certain hiccups. But we've had I don't know, nearly 90 minutes of a chat. I could sit and listen to you all day, man. Honestly, I love you. Make me feel safe. I've got a bit of sanity when I'm talking to you, just seeing as things are so polarized. But so we probably should round it up. Oliver, closing kind of comments, observations. Yeah. What do you reckon? And then we'll go back to Phil.
Well, the bit that Phil just mentioned about the drinking and the cigarette makes him sound so normal. Because if we're talking of a specific diet, then I'm just thinking, yeah, you've just got to walk that particular path. That's it. But you're like, no, there's nothing wrong with a smoke or a drink from time to time. And you've mentioned a few things that are kind of personal, because when you mentioned the fatty liver and the cysts, for me, this is quite new. But previously, I'm teetotal. When I go in for a checkup every so often, it was those questions. Do you drink? No. How many units a week? I don't drink, period. That's it. And then, well, we need to give you a scan because there's something down there. And then there was a couple of cysts. And that's it. They said, no, they're too small. We'll leave them as is. If they get bigger, we might need to operate. But in my head, I'm not thinking, I don't want an operation. I just want to know, what do I need to do? But there isn't anything. Plus, I don't want any peels from them.
You need some liver flushing, man, on each new moon for a few months in a row. It's the only bit of woo-woo I've kept onto. I'll contact me. I'll send you details on how to flush the liver. It's an unpleasant process, but it's very satisfying.
Because I was going to say, I was actually typing it down already. Liver flushing high-fat diet when you brought those up.
No, it's worse than that. It's like a one-night process once a month, and it's very unpleasant. I'll let you know about.
We'll talk about it later then. But with what you guys are offering, I think that there's a lot of value to be had, and it's not an overnight process. It's a reprogramming and an understanding of the stuff that we put into our body. And something that we covered yesterday, or you covered yesterday, very much so was inflammation for quite a few things. But on closing, there's a lot to learn. I enjoy listening to both of you because I'm learning something new, and it's making me think as well. Especially if I thought or think that I'm quite healthy, I watch what I eat. The carnivore diet does sound incredibly interesting. It also sounds scary because I'm thinking, if I'm hungry, I want a snack. Can I just pick up a packet of crisps or have an apple or a banana?
Oliver, snacking confuses the liver. The more that you get into ketosis, the less you need snacking. You won't need it. You know, if you eat a really good fatty meal with meat and whatever, you're just done. You're not hungry for a long time. It's not the same as that carb thing. And if you need a snack at the beginning, just keep some pork scratchings on hand. You know, it's all right.
I love my pork scratchings. But no, thanks, Phil. Thanks, Dennis.
Pleasure. And what strikes me is, even just listening to you guys talk, is how I'm going to swear, how the fuck did it become heresy that for people to suggest going back to what we did 100 years ago is anti-health in some way? And we've got this new paradigm, which is relatively, 100 years old, let's say, of pushing these chemicals that come from God knows what into our bodies. And if we're telling people to do stuff that doesn't mean that, we're heretics. And we could just risk getting deplatformed. Phil, close it out.
Dennis. It's science. It's science. You're a science denier. I'm appalled that I've even been on this show. Disgraceful.
Incredible, isn't it? I think that inversion is the perfect word. We're living in an upside world. Gentlemen, I cannot thank you guys enough. I've had an absolutely awesome, even though I'm kind of a little bit sleep deprived, having crawled out of bed at 5 o'clock. I've had an absolutely awesome conversation. And even though it's 7, 8, getting on to 8 a.m. here, I was thinking, geez, I'd like a glass of wine right now.
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry.
Okay, gentlemen.
Look, guys, I mean, if anyone's watching this, I really don't condone that. I mean, I'd like to really highlight that when I was healing and I had to really fix myself, you can't do any of those things. Right? You can get away with it after a while when you've earned your stripes and you know how far you can push it, and you can have some fun every now and again, if that's your idea of fun. And if it isn't, well, even better for you. But when you're healing up, then it's really, really best if you can just do none of that, particularly anything that goes in the digestive tract, but like spirits are a lot better than, well, a little bit better than wine, and wine is a hell of a lot better than beer, which is just mashed grain soup. So, just be educated on all the gray areas in all of this. It's not like drinking's bad, not drinking's good. It's not that simple, And it's smoking's bad, not smoking's good. It's, there's a whole load of gray areas in between.
It's in context and it's in nuanced. It's nuanced as well. And it'd be such a shame if people walked away and listened to the last 10 minutes of this and said, Phil and Dennis are telling us we should drink alcohol and smoke. These guys are lunatics. And that kind of shit happens. And that's unfortunately the kind of, bullshit ad hominem attacks that are delivered in order to twist what is incredibly important information.
Yeah, I think the main thing to point out is that absolutely everything we're being told that are the main things about health are not the main things about health. I mean, if you suddenly get sick and you want to get well again, then you listen to the mainstream and it's like low fat and high fiber and all of that thing, and don't smoke and don't drink, and then go pounding the streets. Now, seriously, who's going to keep to that? They're used to burgers and fries, and they're used to sitting down and drinking a load of beer and smoking. Nobody's going to keep to that. Jogging. Have you ever seen anyone running in the street and looking like they really love it? They don't. They're miserable, right? The people who go down to the gym and they kind of might be excited at getting a personal best lift or doing a sprint or something, that's what we're designed to do. We're not designed to pound the pavement, and everybody hates it. And you see them year in, year out, and they're always fat and nothing ever happens to them. Right? They never lose any weight. It's nonsense. And so, you look at these things that you're told are the ways to get healthy, and they're all completely misleading. So if you do everything else right, the occasional drink and the occasional smoke really is the least of your worries. But the doctor will tell you to stop drinking and stop smoking, and that's the main things you need to do. Well, and it's massively misleading. You know, everything else is just absolute propaganda of what you need to do.
They'll also tell you you got a medication deficiency of one sort or another.
Yeah. So, you know, you come out of there even worse than you went in, except you change something. So you think you're being healthy and you go, well, you know, I eat so well. And then you end up going to Slimming World or what's it called? Weight Watchers, you know, and that's set up for repeat business as well. That's absolutely disastrous nonsense. Yep. So they'll lose some weight with a bit of willpower. And then, you know, a year or so down the line, they're heavier than they were when they started. Oh, we got to go back again because we failed. Oh, I'd love to blow up Weight Watchers and Slimming World. Honestly, I just, those people.
It's a great social club, but absolutely useless value other than that.
Absolutely useless. Absolutely nonsense.
It's a good social club. Yeah. Good for people to connect, but from a physical point of view, absolutely. Guys, we finish it, man. I've just really enjoyed this. I can't thank you guys enough for jumping on, and I'll send both of you guys the recording of this, and I look forward to exposing your work, Phil, to some more people, man.
Thank you so much, Dennis.
Absolutely.
And great to chat to you, Oliver. Your comments yesterday, I thought you might be a laugh, and it's been great to meet you.
I've got plenty of stories.
I can imagine.
Oliver, thanks so much for jumping in. Really appreciate you as well.
Cheers, Dennis. See you, Phil.
See you later.